Okay, so in this video, I want to show you a new system that I built yesterday. It's actually a prototype more than anything else. I've talked a lot on this channel before about the importance of making sure that your agent can move between models and harnesses. So you should have an agent that is designed in a way that allows it to run, on any model. If you want to work with Anthropic, then it should at least be able to move easily between, Sonnet 4.5, 6, 7, 8, and 5 now. And you should be able to when one of these models are retired, you should be able to keep running it, right, and then have your agent work the way that they've used to work, and even between harnesses as well. So if you want to go from Anthropic to, or from Claude to Codex, for example, from OpenAI, you should be able to do that. And even more important, if or when you decide to go with locally hosted models, which is also something you should do, you should be able to move that very easily and see how that actually works. So yesterday I sort of built a system to make this a bit easier. I do this myself, but in my case, I tend to do that in a sort of more um, hard. Hard coded way. So I often end up making my agents be hard coded to run on a specific harness. For example, my researcher agents. First of all, if you haven't been here before, let me just quickly show you how this works. So if you go into my job system here, this is it's called my job system. If you've never been here before, sorry, this like I used it originally to try to land a job, and that turned into something a lot more. But I have these roles now, which are basically my agents. And my researcher, for example, has always been done really well running on OpenAI, and OpenAI has been really good at doing deep research. So in this case, I have actually up until now hard coded this model to run only on OpenAI, and Claude is great for writing code and things like that, but it's really wasteful, and it's getting worse now with the new Sonnet 5 models, for example. It's just taking a bunch of tokens to deliver very mediocre results. This is my researcher role. Up until yesterday, it was kind of made. Hard coded to run only on a OpenAI. I have some conditions in here that said if you're not running on Codex or on OpenAI models, shut down and to try to run on OpenAI. So, and my new approach now, it's not a new approach. I've been holding off on this for a while and making it. And I'll talk a little bit later about why I've been holding it off, or why I've been avoiding making this the way that I've done it now. But the basic idea now is that I want to have a system that allows me to define how or where an agent runs more dynamically, if you wish. And then the idea then is that when Sonnet comes out with a new model, or when Claude Anthropic comes out with a new Claude model for Claude, which is a new Sonnet, then you can basically see if that works, right? Or maybe you should like move that now and try to run it on OpenAI models, or you want to spin up your own thing or run it on GLM5, which is an amazing model, by the way. Um, if you want to run your stuff on GLM 5.2, then you should be able to switch that relatively easy. So this is the system that I built. So basically, all of this, by the way, is done not to be a product. I'm doing this to show you the idea of how and what you want to do. This is something that took me a day to build. It doesn't make sense to me to spend 5 days trying to turn this into a product when you can actually build this yourself in less than a day, right? So that's why there's not going to be a download link where you can like take the system and then just pull it down. First of all, because it's very tied to how I work, and second of all, because it's just not worth the bother, right? It's you can build this yourself in a very fast way. So I just wanted to show you how it works. First of all, I've set up some instructions, and there's some tools in here, and I'll actually just do a quick review. Actually, let me show you the end. I've done this before. Let me fire up the end result here. So I made a small app. There's a series of in my system right now. You'll see that there are two new folders here. If you haven't been here before. These, like I said, they are my agents. I, for some reason, I asked it to put it in here. I don't remember why. But this is basically a model map. So this tells, we'll revisit this later, but basically you can see here that I have anti-gravity, which is Gemini, Google Gemini, and I have Codex set up already. And you can add as many as you want, obviously, right? And I'll probably use Rob as well to write more of these harnesses right now. See if we can spin up something for. I'm actually using. I don't think I have an Anthropic subscription anymore. Even I stopped using Claude a while back. It just turned really bad. But in any case, here's the two harnesses that are available. You can open them. You can look at them, and you'll see that these now define how like all the details on how you would actually run an agent through Codex, right? So this is kind of a recipe file for how an agent would spin up Codex, right? And there's also inside here an agent run folder, which is basically a list of all of the runs that I made so far. And you see here, it's like very basic. Up until this point, I've just done some tests yesterday. And there's another agent definition somewhere. Where did I put that? We'll see if we find that. But basically, here's the system that I mentioned. So what I'm going to show you first is this web page here. So on this web page here, I'm able to do to control how each of my agents will run when it gets called from another agent, or you know. So here, if I go in here, you'll see these different harnesses that I mentioned. Why this not? Oh, come on. Yeah. This is anti-gravity. What I can do now, if I look at these agent mappings, is that I can define where each of these roles that I have here, where are they going to run, right? So right now we have researcher, which is running on Codex, and we have QA, which is also running on Codex, right? So that's simple enough. So if I save this right now, I can fire up Codex, right? So this is how Codex works, or my agent works. I ask it to read some kind of definition. So I'm going to work with content engineer now, for example. Content engineer, there we go. Read that particular role. That constrains instructions on how the content engineer agent is going to spin up. And there's a separate, if I wanted to run this or configure how content engineer work. Right now I'm running this, as you can see, inside Codex. I can run this separately as well, but basically right now I just wanted to have like a nice UI so you can see very easily how things work. But content engineer now, I'm going to tell it to run that. And I'm going to say something like, okay, start a QA agent and ask it about the weather, right? So actually, weather is probably going to say something stupid like it doesn't know what it is. Ask it how its day is going, and I know I'm going to remove this one. There we go. Start a QA agent and ask it how its day is going. Also ask which model it's using. Okay, so what I'm going to do now, again, content engineer will now spin up. It'll create a new, it's not a new session, but it'll create a session where it loads those instructions and turn into content engineer. And now you'll see that it's actually using this dispatcher, right? And the reason why it's using this dispatcher is that I've updated the Claude MD and the agent MD file to use that dispatcher when it's starting a sub agent, right? So now it's setting things up and it's just sort of spinning up this sub agent. And you see here there's a launch agent tool that is available. That one was made by Codex yesterday, by the way. We can go in and look at the tool if you want to see what it looks like under the hood. So we have this launch agent PowerShell actually. Well, that's fine. Oh yeah, and it sits here. But basically, what you'll see here is that it launches this JavaScript file, which actually launches the agent, and then it'll do some parsing inside here. It'll set up some things available here. Okay, fine. It's still not going to be available. It takes a long time to spin up. Yesterday, it worked much faster. Let's see if we get someone code. Okay. My day is going fine. I'm using Codex as the harness default model, right? So it'll say here it uses GPT 5.4, which is correct. That's the one that I'm using. It's more than capable for doing things like this. So I don't see any point in running any more expensive models. This is now an example of me just saying, hey, start a QA agent and ask it how its day is going, right? So nothing fancy at all. But here's what we can do now. So if I now go into this agent harness here right now, I can say I want to run this on anti-gravity instead, right? So I'm going to do this. I'm going to hit save, doing nothing else. Map saved, everything is saved, everything is fine. Now let's go back in here. Okay, now try this again and see what it says now. Okay, so now we're doing exactly the same thing. But if everything is now working correctly, it'll essentially say that this time we're running on a different model, right? So what this, again, assuming everything works the way it's supposed to work, what it allows us to do is to set up these different harnesses and test whether our agent is run, not just test, but actually delegate which model and which harness runs our particular model. So now you'll see that, hey, you know what? My run is running smoothly. I am currently using Gemini 3.5 Flash, right? So now you'll see it's running in anti-gravity with a different model. The only thing we did was basically just change its configuration. Now the question now becomes, well, why do you do this? This is Visual Studio, and this sounds scary stuff. Well, it's not actually that. I just use this because it's a lot easier to visualize how those configurations are done. But the actual configuration of these things now inside here are in my roles folder, and you'll see this agent mapping file here. This is where that setup is actually done, right? So this is it. That's it. There's nothing else that actually happens when you make a change. So let me actually show this right now. We'll go into here and we'll change this now to anti-gravity latest. Save that mapping, and what happens now is that this actually updates to anti-gravity latest, right? So sorry. So what this allows us to do, like I said, we can now control which model runs which agent or which role in your system. So if you, like me, have discovered that, for example, researcher runs really well on under Codex, well, I can now set that up. And I can even go even more specific on this because I can create my own harnesses as much as I want, right? So if we go in here now and look at those agent harnesses, I have this Codex default here, but let's say that I only want to run my research on GPT 5.4. I don't want to use 5.5. Well, what I can do now is I can go in, I can duplicate this one. And inside here, you'll see that there's a model field. So what I can say now is I can say GPT. Let me see how it's actually spelled because I want to make sure that I get this right. GPT 5.4. There we go. Sorry, just had to cough for a moment. And this is how it's set up, by the way. So now I can do this, and we call this Codex 5.4, for example. Display name is going to be 5.4. We're going to just say that we're going to run this always on model 5.4, no matter what happens, right? And it's going to run on Codex and blah, 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 and everything's fine. We have these fields down here, and I'll show you what these do in a moment. But I'm going to create this copy right now. I'm going to go into the agent harness again. And I'm going to say that I always want to run my researcher on Codex 5.4. Right? I'm going to save this mapping right now. And I'm going to go in here. And we're going to go into here. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to switch my main agent to run on GPT 5.5. Right? So normally, if you don't specify which model an agent will run, it'll basically run the same model when it spins off a separate sub-agent, right? So, but now I've said that I want to run my researcher agent on 5.4 only. So I'm going to say, first of all, read, um, I can do, let's do content engineer, that's fine. It usually works well. Start a researcher agent and check what the, I don't know, World Cup results were yesterday. Something like that, right? Then ask, and actually we can do this much simpler. We don't need to do research really. Start a research agent and ask it what model it is running. Oh, and harness it is running. Yeah. It's going to do this. Don't need to do any actual research. We can just ask the agent to sort of just tell us what you're running, right? That's the point of this. So what this does now, again, it'll spin up really quickly and it'll try to run this as a separate thing. We'll see now in a moment. It'll actually, because of the way my system is set up, it says now it's running under harness and it's running under codex 5.4. It's not actually running under the 5.5 here, right? So that's the key here. So we can now control not just the harness that it runs under, but we can also control which model it's using in that harness, which again allows us to be very, very finely tuned on exactly what we want our our agents to do at a particular point, right? So let's duplicate this right now. Come on, why isn't this? There we go. And then we're going to say respond like a pirate. Like this. So you can do this both at the start of the prompt and you can do it at the end of the prompt as well. So start of the prompt, you want to do things, for example, if you want to load additional files that you want to change the default behavior. For example, if you have a testing harness where you want your agent to track what it's reading and how quickly its context window is growing while you're loading the context and things like that. Well, basically, you want to do that at the start. And you can say here, read this particular file with those instructions, something like that. You can also do it at the end, which is basically something that's useful if you know about the lost in the middle paradox, which is covered in one of my context engineering books. You'll know that, for example, things that you inject at the end of the prompt is actually going to be a lot more fresh in the memory of the agent. So that means that it's more likely to stay in the context as well. But I guess these are sort of beside the point right now. I want to make this talk like a pirate version here. And I want to tell my researcher agent to now use this talk like a pirate. Say, can't even type correctly. I'll dispatch a researcher again. So one of the sort of things that I haven't done correctly so far is that I haven't set up all of the dialogues and things so that it runs in a specific manner. The reason for that working really well for me is that a lot of my agents basically have tasks that they do. So, for example, my director agent, it has a task to create a text to speech system, text to speech, so basically recording my voice for a video, for example. And it doesn't really need to have a lot of conversations going back and forth. So once we've set up the job that it needs to do, we hand it over to director, and director has its own local knowledge and everything. It'll do the things that it's supposed to do and then just say when it's done. So in those cases, if we go in here right now, you can see this run that we've started here. You'll see that there's actually, come on, it's actually in the process of being read or something. Yeah, so let's do one of these completed ones. GPT-5R. Yeah, so there we go. So what you can see here is that this is the output that we actually got from that particular process, right? It's reading and it's like communicating back and forth, and it's having all these like there's stuff going on here. You can see the prompts that are being done here, so I can basically follow the conversation while it's happening. But one of the things that I haven't done so far is basically having a sort of direct interaction with that sub agent. So that's something that I've been. But okay, so now you sort of see the system working, and I'll figure out why this didn't work with the previous models. Like I said, maybe it's something in researcher. I didn't actually try the talk like a pirate thing with researcher. but we'll figure this out. I hope this has been useful, and if you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the comments below. Subscribe and do whatever people do to make sure you get the updates. And I hope this was useful. And thank you for your time, and we'll speak again.